In Park County, Indiana, there is a quiet place called Billie Creek Village. At first glance, it looks like a step back in time. Old wooden buildings stand neatly in rows, a church, a schoolhouse, a general store, and homes from the 1800s. By day, it feels calm, almost like a small town frozen in history. But if Junkyard Diggs' home is anything to go off of, every home from the 1800s is absolutely haunted. But at night, the atmosphere changes. The wind moves through the trees, floorboards creak inside of empty buildings, and the shadows seem to grow deeper. Billie Creek Village was built to preserve the past, but it has also gathered stories that go beyond history. And so the question rises, are these tales only imagination, or is there something here that still remains after dark? The story of Billie Creek Village begins not with ghost tales, but with a community pride. In the late 1950s, Park County, Indiana discovered something special about itself. The country held its very first Covered Bridge Festival in 1957, and people came from near and far to see the old wooden bridges that stretched across the rivers. Soon after, in the 1960s, the county added the Maple Fair, celebrating the maple trees and their syrup. These events reminded people of their roots. The land had history and the community wanted it to be kept alive. Out of this pride came a bigger idea. What if there was a place where the past could be saved, not just in books, but in buildings people could walk through? By the mid-1960s, plans were made to gather historic homes, a schoolhouse, the church, and other old structures from around the county. They would then be moved to a 70-acre site near Rockville. The site was named after Williams Creek, though everyone just called it Billie Creek, because for some reason, Billy is short for Williams. I don't know, it's just like Dick and Richard, I guess. Work began, and little by little, the vision would take shape. By 1969, the village opened its doors, and at first it was small, but it quickly grew into something larger, a true living museum. Actors dressed in clothing from the 1800s. Families could see blacksmiths at work, listen to the creak of wagon wheels, and watch reenactments of daily life long ago. Annual events brought the village to life, turning history into an experience that you could see, hear, and touch. When the buildings of Billie Creek were brought together, they didn't just form a village. They gathered the weight of forgotten lives. Time itself seemed stitched into the wood and stone, and in quiet moments, it feels as if those years still breathe. A walk down the paths is not only a step through history, but an encounter with something unsettled, something that never really fully left. The log cabins are some of the oldest. One of them, the Basin Plenty cabin, was built around 1830. It was made from poplar wood joined together without a single nail. Every beam was fitted carefully by hand, the kind of work that has lasted nearly 2 centuries. Inside, you can almost imagine the crackle of fire and the sound of voices from long ago. Then there are the churches. The St. Joseph's Catholic Church, built in 1886, stands tall with its simple yet sturdy frame. A small Baptist church sits quietly nearby, once filled with hymns on a Sunday morning. Me being a tambourine-shaking Baptist myself, yeah, that's right, it made it. But one of the most talked about is the Union Baptist Church. The village also holds the governor's house, once the home of Joseph A. Wright, the 10th governor of Indiana. Wright's time here was marked by both leadership and loss. His wife's illness weighed heavily on the family, and after her passing, he adopted children to kind of fill the quiet halls of his home. The house still carries the dignity of a man who shaped the state, but it also carries the memories of sorrow. Across the grounds, 3 historic covered bridges remind visitors why Park County is called the covered bridge capital of the world. The Billie Creek Bridge, built in 1895, still stands proudly at the entrance. The Beeson Covered Bridge from 1906 and the Leatherwood Station Bridge, built in 1899. These both are going to complete the set. Their wooden arches and trusses were once vital paths across rivers. Now they are silent landmarks of a much slower time. The treasures do not stop there. The White Star Mine, in use from 1931 to 1939, hints at the working life of miners there. The general store, built between 1850 and 1860, still looks ready to open its doors to customers. The office of Dr. Rice, a mid-19th century country doctor, stands as a reminder of medicine before modern hospitals. The one-room schoolhouse from 1913 tells of chalkboards, coal stoves, and children learning their lessons on wooden benches. Around it all, the sounds of the past echo faintly. The blacksmith shop once rang with hammer strikes on hot iron. The print shop carried the smell of ink and paper, and the maple sugar camp filled the air with the sweet scent of boiling sap. Each building was saved to preserve history. But when history is gathered in one place, sometimes the past feels a little closer than expected. For many years, Billie Creek Village was alive with history. Families came to learn, school groups toured the grounds, and festivals filled the air with laughter. But by the early 2000s, change had begun to creep in. The volunteers who had built the village's legacy were getting older. Fewer people came through the gates each season. Money to keep up the buildings grew harder to find. By 2005, the future looked pretty grim. Some even spoke of tearing the whole place down. The log cabins, the covered bridges, the governor's house, all of it nearly lost to time. The most dramatic moment came in 2012. The entire 70 acres of Billie Creek Village went up for auction. There was a real risk that the land would be divided and sold off piece by piece. Each historic building could have been scattered, dismantled, or just left to rot. For those who love the village, it felt like watching a chapter of Indiana's story close forever. Then, a brief spark of hope. In 2014, the village reopened with a celebration. For a moment, it seemed like Billie Creek might actually rise again. Visitors walked the covered bridges once more. The children peeked into the one-room schoolhouse. The sound of life returned to the grounds. But the revival was fairly short-lived. Not long after, the gates closed again. The building stood silent, and weather and time pressed hard against their old walls. And yet, Billie Creek did not fade completely. In 2012, a new caretaker stepped in, an entrepreneur named Greg Larson. He brought fresh plans and new energy. His vision was not only to restore the history of Billie Creek, but to open it in new ways. The village came alive once more, this time with tours, special events, overnight stays, and even some paranormal investigations. When the sun goes down at Billie Creek Village, the quiet changes. The air feels different, heavy with something unseen. Many say that the past never left these grounds. Others believe that when the old buildings were moved here, the spirits followed too. Whatever the reason, the stories are the same. Footsteps with no one there, shadows moving where light should be, voices that whisper out of the dark. Paranormal teams come with cameras, meters, and recorders. They walk the empty paths at night, and often they leave with evidence they cannot explain. The general store is said to be one of the most active. Visitors tell of hearing phantom conversations as if two people were talking just out of sight. Objects have been found moved when no one touched them. Some claim to have actually seen apparition of a man in a suit with a bowler hat, while others glimpse a ghostly storekeeper around the counter. The schoolhouse may hold one of the most famous encounters. In 2017, a photo taken on its steps showed what looked like a girl in an old-fashioned dress. Since then, laughter has been heard in the halls when no children were around. Desks would scrape across the floor, the bells ring by themselves. Paranormal investigator teams place toys and chalk inside overnight, only to return to find them they have moved. Some whisper that a ghostly schoolgirl still waits for class to begin. In Dr. Rice's office, the air feels decidedly a bit more heavy. Many describe this unsettling feeling of being watched. Some claim to see the spirit of a young patient, while others believe Dr. Rice himself still makes his rounds, his shadow brushing past the curtains even when there is no breeze to move them. The covered bridges are perhaps, though, the strangest of all. Inside the wooden tunnels, footsteps echo as if someone is following close behind. Shadowy figures dart across the beams only to vanish completely. Paranormal teams actually have used laser grids and have seen human-shaped outlines interrupt the light and then disappear. Whistling has been heard, soft and clear, stopping the moment that anyone steps inside. Locals actually recall an old story of a traveler who died of a heart attack while crossing. Some believe his ghost actually still walks there. And that's pretty much why it's important to take care of your meat suit while you got it, so go for a run after you listen to this. The churches also carry whispers. Cold spots have been felt near altars. Strange sighs and faint prayers have been recorded on empty nights, but none compare to the Union Baptist Church, now infamous for its legend of the black-eyed demon. A paranormal team claimed to see a shadow with glowing eyes and felt a wave of dread inside its dark halls. The story spread quickly on social media, giving the church a frightening reputation. Other parts of the village have their own mysteries. At the Civil War farmhouse, people have seen a figure in the upper window, even when the house was locked. In the barns, loud bangs can be heard in the night, and some even report seeing a lantern light swaying gently as a long-dead farmhand still walks his rounds. Today, Billie Creek Village is more than just a museum of history. It has become a place where people come looking for the unknown. Public ghost tours are offered after dark, and some groups even rent the entire village overnight. From 7 p.m. until dawn, the quiet streets become a stage for those hoping to meet the past face to face. Investigators do not come empty-handed. They bring EMF detectors to measure invisible energy, basically being the ghost facers, EVP recorders to capture ghostly voices, thermal cameras to see heat in the dark, and laser grids that can reveal movement where no one stands. And sometimes they claim the equipment delivers. One team recorded the sound of a child's laughter on the schoolhouse steps at around 3 a.m., when the village was completely empty. Another group's thermal camera picked up the shape of a person inside of a room glowing with heat, but when they entered, the figure vanished. Photographs and video clips have also caught some pretty strange things. Shadows where no one would be, figures peering from windows, and faces that were not seen in the moment but appeared later on film. Not all encounters in Billie Creek Village, though, are soft or harmless. Some have essentially been far more personal. In the governor's house, a grand home once tied to Indiana's history, a woman chose to stay overnight. She later described waking to a terrifying weight pressing down on her shoulders. She could not lift her arms or cry out. The pressure was firm, like cold hands holding her in place. When the feeling finally lifted, she found herself alone in the locked room, shaken and convinced that someone unseen had stood over her. If the governor's house feels intrusive, the Union Baptist Church feels openly hostile. A well-known paranormal team once entered the church after dark, filming their investigation for their channel. They claimed that from the far end of the darkened room, a pair of glowing eyes appeared, fixed on them with an unblinking stare. A low growl rumbled through the rafters, and the air seemed to press down heavy around them. One investigator felt his legs weaken. Another said her chest tightened until she could barely breathe. Moments later, a team member collapsed onto the wooden floor. They fled, convinced that whatever stays in the church does not welcome intruders. Stories like these ripple through the village. Some people speak of shadows that move against the walls, others, the unseen figures brushing past the narrow hallways. Whether loud or silent, sudden or slow, these moments carry the same message. Billie Creek Village is not always at rest. So what is really happening there? Are these true encounters with the supernatural or something else entirely? The first of the theories concerning all of this are like the psychological and environmental factors, which are fairly important, and honestly, one of the most logical explanations for this reported activity at Billie Creek Village, and that is just psychology mixed with the natural environment. Old wood shifts, metal creaks, and wind whistles through the cracks. These sounds can resemble footsteps, voices, or even sighs. Covered bridges with their enclosed wooden design amplify even the smallest of noises. A single footstep can echo like an entire group of people walking. Humans are also, let's be real here, highly suggestible. When people enter a place already described as haunted, they may expect to experience something rather strange. Their brains, primed with ghost stories, misinterpret ordinary sights and sounds. Shadows become figures. A cold draft feels like a ghostly presence. This expectation effects would explain why so many visitors report like a similar phenomenon. On the other hand, if psychology and environment explain everything, then why do multiple groups record the same specific phenomena, such as laughter, whispers, or thermal shapes, in different investigations? Skeptics argue that the equipment is unreliable and easily influenced by natural factors, but believers note that consistent patterns suggest more than just imagination. Some paranormal researchers suggest that strong emotional events kind of leave an imprint on places. Billie Creek Village is full of buildings tied to powerful moments: births, deaths, illnesses, worship, and hard labor. According to this residual energy theory, these emotions may replay like recordings. Basically a death echo. For example, laughter in the schoolhouse may not be the spirit of a child still present, but an echo of many children who once studied there. The sighs in the church may not be a ghost at all, but a fragment of the countless prayers and sorrows carried inside. Critics argue that this theory lacks any type of scientific evidence. How could emotions physically imprint themselves onto wood and stone? Without measurable proof, residual energy remains an idea rather than a tested fact. Still, it provides a middle ground acknowledging strange experiences without requiring conscious spirits. Spirits could also be attached to maybe relocated buildings. When the founders of Billie Creek Village moved historic buildings to the site, they may not have actually just transported wood and nails, and believers argue that spirits tied to these buildings could have also followed. If ghosts remain connected to their homes, churches, and workplaces, then gathering dozens of these structures in one spot could concentrate their presence. This could explain why so many different types of hauntings occur in this single location. Each building might bring its own spirit, creating a village of living and dead together. Skeptics counter this by assuming spirits are bound to objects or buildings, something really not proven, and if true, similar museums that move buildings should be equally haunted, yet few are known for this level of paranormal reputation. Is Billie Creek truly unique, or is it a haunted mess of just reputation partly fueled by storytelling and tourism, which I'm doing right now? Remains to be seen. But the other theory also is maybe there really are active hauntings. Conscious spirits, the strongest claims of this, point towards active hauntings in which entities seem aware of the living. Visitors report seeing figures who appear to move with intention. The man in the general store who vanishes, the child at the schoolhouse doorway, the storekeeper behind the counter. These apparitions don't act like echoes. They appear responsive as if still part of the village. This theory suggests that some spirits at Billie Creek Village may still remain with awareness, watching and sometimes interacting with visitors. Paranormal equipment often picks up voices that answer questions or objects that move in response to investigators, supporting the idea of potentially conscious entities. But skeptics argue that responses may be coincidences, selective memory, or just human interpretation of random sounds. Believers, however, point to repeated events, such as the 2017 schoolhouse photo, as evidence that not all encounters can be dismissed so easily. And obviously, the most frightening one would obviously be the black-eyed demon. This theory pretty much claims that Billie Creek Village may house something darker than just human spirits. The so-called black-eyed demon has reports describing glowing eyes, oppressive fear, growls, and even physical attacks. Some investigators believe this is not a ghost but a malevolent entity, possibly drawn by fear, suffering, or energy within the Union Baptist Church. Of course, I guess if you take the church and you remove it off hallowed ground, maybe it's not hallowed anymore. But supporters argue that the consistency of fear across the groups and the extreme nature of experiences point to something beyond ordinary hauntings. They suggest that the fear itself may feed such a presence, making it stronger over time. But skeptics see this as a classic urban legend behavior. Ghost shows and social media amplify the most dramatic stories. Once a place is rumored to hold a demon, visitors go in expecting one, and then fear makes ordinary shadows seem monstrous. In this view, the black-eyed demon may be more of a reflection of human imagination than the supernatural truth. So what could it be? One of the most plausible theories seems to be the residual energy theory. This theory suggests that powerful emotions leave a trace behind like fingerprints pressed into the air and walls. At Billie Creek Village, there has been plenty of emotion. Children, again, once laughed and cried in the schoolhouse. Families prayed inside the churches. There were people that died. Patients suffered inside Dr. Rice's office. These moments were heavy, sometimes joyful, sometimes tragic, and perhaps they never really fully left. Yet there are problems. If it is only echoes, why do some people report being touched? Why do investigators capture answers to the questions on recorders? Could echoes really interact? That is where the theories kind of begin to blur. Or perhaps it is a combined explanation. Residual energy may explain the repeating sounds and shadows, while the human mind, expectation, suggestion, and fear, fills in the rest. And maybe, just maybe, there are moments that go beyond just the echoes. The schoolgirl in the photo, the man at the store, the eyes at the church. Incidents that point to something aware, just not a replay. In this way, Billie Creek Village is not only a museum of Indiana's past, but it's also a museum of the unseen. Honestly, given that Halloween is coming up, what they should really do is do like Halloween stuff there, and you would just make absolute bank. Its cabins and bridges hold the weight of history, yet its shadows hold on to something hard to explain. By daylight, the village teaches visitors about covered bridges, the schools, the lives of early settlers, which basically sucked all the time back then. But when night falls, those same places become stages for whispers, footsteps, and shapes that slip between the trees. The general store is no longer just a relic. It becomes a place where unseen voices trade words across the counter. The schoolhouse is no longer a classroom. It becomes a waiting room for a child no one can find. The covered bridges are no longer just simple crossings. They become passageways into the silence that listens back. And so, Billie Creek stands as more than a preserved village. It is a crossroad between memory and mystery, between history and haunting. And I always like to break in at the end here. Some people say they like it, some people don't say they like it. I don't know what you guys like. Anyways, the point that I want to cover here. Now, this is true. When you have human expectations as far as a place is haunted, it's almost intrinsic. You're not going to be able to necessarily fight it. You can tell yourself like, oh yeah, no, I'm not going to worry about that, or no, that's not real, blah, blah, blah. But there's always going to be that part of your mind that's going to believe it, and then that can kind of cause other things to happen. Not to mention, being in a creepy village at night of like old buildings that you've also been told is haunted, I believe that can kind of prime anybody's brain to kind of pay attention and, see things that aren't there or hear things that aren't really that big of a deal. Okay, so let me put it this way, right? There's these stories that go around all the time, especially this time of year, of, if your trash can is tipped over in Appalachia, don't check your trash can, or some stupid thing like that. Or they hear a scream in the woods and it's usually somebody from out of town and they don't really know what's out there. So they start freaking out thinking it's man, bear, pig or something. The reality is it's probably just a bobcat screaming. Like they scream, believe it or not. Or it could be any type of animal out there. And if your trash can's tipped over, it's probably just a trash panda that knocked it over. So the point is that if you're primed to believe that something is freaky already, then obviously you're probably gonna freak yourself out a little bit. And in this way, they could definitely freak themselves out. Now, is it possible things are haunted? So obviously nothing can really be scientifically tested as of yet, but kind of one of the things that I've always held is that humans have a soul. Now, it's pretty much stated that the dead know nothing, and yet supernatural stuff, like, okay, let's just take it back to all throughout human history, right? Typically things that we don't understand, we attribute to the supernatural, but the supernatural to humanity has always been kind of a thing, I guess is the best way to put it, because we just couldn't explain it. Now, you take what we know nowadays, right? Like, let's say I brought somebody back from the Middle Ages, and I was like, oh, hey, look, I'm going to turn on this TV with a remote, and I turn on a TV, which essentially to them is just a window to another world, and I use a remote to do it, right? That looks supernatural. They don't understand radio signals. They don't understand TVs. They would be like, oh my God, like, obviously burn the witch sort of scenario. So that's kind of with this stuff. How much, as a species, do we really know about the environment around us, right? If you take just on an astronomical scale, it was a cosmological scale, I guess. Cosmetology is hair. Yeah, cosmic scale, there we go. If you take that kind of information and, well, why is our universe still expanding, right? We don't necessarily know. People say dark energy, people say dark matter, but we've never detected either of those things. We just assume it exists. So dark matter and dark energy, that could be the supernatural essentially. And we just don't have a way to detect it, which is fairly standard, I think. And also, this one's gonna get way out here as a theory, okay? We are limited by what we are able to perceive, right? We see in the third or three dimension, but we can feel the fourth dimension being time, right? So if I can see in the third dimension, right? Imagine for a second, I'm trying to explain to a two-dimensional creature that there is something beyond length and width, but it can't perceive it because it is a two-dimensional creature. So if you take that information and you go from there, let's say humanity, right? Let's say when we die, you become sort of like a higher form. You go, heaven or hell, whatever you believe in, you become a higher form, and now you're able to actually exist in time, I guess is the best way to put it. To us, it would look like supernatural hauntings or words or whatever, but to somebody who's already passed on and is basically shirked their physical form of three dimensions, I guess is the best way to put it, you can now access that fourth or fifth dimension, whatever that might be, and you can now exist in all points in time, just depending on where you want to be. So while we can perceive it sometimes, it's not perceiving it always. I'm not really sure if I'm explaining that hypothesis correct. I don't even think that would be a hypothesis. That would just be a crackpot theory. But that's kind of how I view it. Are hauntings actually hauntings? Or is it basically when we pass on, possibly there's a different way that we can actually see in the universe? Not really sure, to be honest with you. But I want to hear what you guys think of that theory, and also of Billie Creek Village. Honestly, I'm going to be up there in Indiana for my cousin's wedding on the 11th, so I might just roll over there and check this place out. And they do need to do something for Halloween, because if it's already allegedly haunted, why would you not lean into that? That just seems crazy to me. But anyhow, I want to thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed, then please leave a like as it helps get the video out there. And subscribing is a great way to stay up to date on when I post. I want to thank my patrons real quick. At the Literal Wendigo tier, we have Grayson West, Monkey Man, Scrungle, and Invictus Echo. Thank you guys for your awesome support. At the Eyewitness Event tier, we have Beaver Malaga and Dragon Master Knight. At the first-hand accounts tier, we have the Soggy Anglerfish. And at the second-hand accounts tier, we have Troy, Fred Rush, Stutz, and Bianca, as well as Pouches. And the rest of my patrons, I do appreciate y'all's support as well. It goes a long way towards helping out, so thank you. All right, that's going to do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I'll see y'all in the next one.